1917, the Russian Revolution takes place, beginning with the fall of the House of Romanov from power and concluding with the Bolshevik establishment of the Soviet Union in 1923. But throughout these 5 years, a lot happened, from changes in power to an internal conflict between the Bolsheviks, Red Army, and the Imperial White Army. This isn't a video about the revolution itself or this political process. This is a video about one specific thing that happened during those 5 years, as the world's largest multi-ethnic empire collapsed after the end of the rule of the Tsars. In its wake, a large number of independent states or entities were declared. Some were ethnic minorities looking for autonomy, some were local rulers attempting to seize their own power, and some were formed in the midst of the country's internal conflict, either attempting to stay neutral or side with one of the forces fighting for power in Russia. By the end of the conflict and the Bolshevik victory, the Soviet Union was established, and the majority of these temporary countries had been dissolved, conquered, or were about to be reincorporated in the new USSR by the hands of the Red Army. And it's about them that this video is about, the temporary countries in 20th century Russia. I got this idea from a picture/map I found online. It's been reposted a few times, so I couldn't find who the original creator was, but all credit to them for putting together some of this information, which I partly used, and for bringing this topic into public attention, if you will. During these 5 years, there were almost 30 states which declared their independence or at least autonomy. We're gonna cover most of them, obviously very briefly, because there isn't that much to know about them. They were short-lived, but still, we can take a look at their location, name, flag, period of existence, and origin. Why did they declare independence, and what did they want? Starting with the Finnish Workers' Republic. Their flag was this plain red one, commonly known as Red Finland. It emerged during the Finnish internal conflict rather than the Russian, but the two happened simultaneously at this time, and it was an indirect consequence of the fall of the Russian Empire. The origin of this republic was initially to consolidate Finnish independence and even expand its territory, but it soon transformed into an attempt to associate Finland with the upcoming Soviet Union. It lasted for less than a year, only for a few months in 1918, and came to an end with the victory of the Social Democrat forces, with the support of Germany, who invaded the territory. Then, close by, in Corellia, the Republic of Utua. Finnish people in the Russian region of Corellia declared independence in July 1919, initially seeking to join Finland. However, the Red Army didn't like the idea, especially since the Finnish Workers' Republic had come to an end, and it was clear to them that democratic Finland would not be joining their Soviet Union. So they occupied the region, and by May 1920, it came to an end. Their flag was this green, red, and black Nordic cross. Also flying the Nordic cross banner, although yellow, red, and blue, was the Republic of North Ingria. Finnish people had lived in the Ingria area since at least the 1600s, and had always been a minority there. With this internal instability, they had the same idea as the Karelian Finns, and declared independence in 1919, hoping to join Finland. The Red Army struck again, and by October 1920, the independence effort had been put down. Apparently, in order to make sure this never happened again, the Russians relocated the entire Finnish population to Central Asia, a common practice in the Russian Empire and then also in the Soviet Union. Continuing south, there was the crazy Soviet Republic of Soldiers and Fortress Builders of Nysar, a really short and concise name. They had this strange pirate-looking flag. Also, as a consequence of the Russian Revolution, a group of close to 100 sailors who were assigned to a navy fort in the Estonian coast declared independence and began taxing the local Estonian population. I'm unsure what their goal was, perhaps just become rulers of the area by themselves. This only lasted for about 3 months though, from December 1917 to February 1918, until they were expelled by German forces. But 2 more serious attempts at states were made in this Baltic area. First, the Baltic Duchy, occupying the area of Estonia and much of Latvia, only lasting from April to November of 1918, and flying this blue and white horizontal striped flag. After the German Empire made a separate peace with Russia through the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, a group of German Baltic nobles declared an independent state and had the goal of joining the German Empire through a personal union. The only thing that seems to have kept them going was the presence of German troops, and by the time they left, the duchy was dissolved. A similar or almost identical situation happened in the southern part of Latvia, attempting to restore the historical duchy of Courland. Poland, using an almost identical flag to the Baltic Duchy except in red, and its existence was only 1 month longer, from March to November of 1918. It was also the personal project of a few German nobles and simply collapsed with the retreat of the German soldiers. But Estonia and Latvia weren't the only Baltic nations with attempted countries being formed, and Lithuania also had one, despite it being very small. The Republic of Perloja, located in the small town of Perloja itself, formed an independent government to rule the city, fearing the instability of the region caused by the presence of Russian, German, and Polish armies. There is an army of around 300 men to defend the city, and what's crazier is that they succeeded. Okay, as far as I know, there were no significant threats, but they still remained de facto independent until 1923. Although their longer lifespan had to do also with the fact that at the end of World War I, the town was located in a League of Nations appointed neutral zone between Lithuania and Poland, and they had this really cool bison flag. Many of these new temporary states were republics, like the Utsu Republic, located in a Ukrainian-speaking part of Austria-Hungary, which I'm sure was also unstable at the time due to World War I and internal troubles. In 1918, these Ukrainians revolted and declared independence, with the aim of joining an independent Western Ukrainian state. Their flag was even what the current Ukrainian flag is. A bunch of troops invaded the area, Hungarians, then Romanians, then Czechs, and eventually Carpathian Ruthenia actually joined Czechoslovakia. They attempted a new independence later on in history as Carpato-Ukraine, but then being annexed by Hungary, although after World War II, it was joined with Ukraine but within the Soviet Union. Another republic and another case of small ethnic minorities seeking independence, the Lemco Republic. The Lemco minority living in the Russian, Polish, Hungarian borderlands saw the collapsing of the two empires as an opportunity to unite its people. They were culturally closer to the Russians and therefore wanted to unite with a democratic Russia. When this was impossible, they tried joining Czechoslovakia but ended up a part of Poland in 1920, only 2 years after their attempted independence, with a tricolor of horizontal blue, yellow, and green stripes. There were other Lemco people who declared the East Lemco Republic or the Komanksa Republic, but they wanted to join Ukraine and not Russia, but they also ended up joining Poland in 1919. Further south was the Crimean People's Republic, which lasted a couple months from December 1917 to January 1918. Established by the Crimean Tatars, the republic was quickly taken over by the Bolshevik army, although these were thrown out by Ukrainian and German forces in April. The country was invaded again by the Red Army, and then by the White Army, and finally the Red Army again in 1921. So essentially everyone was fighting over Crimea, which kind of sounds familiar. At the end, it seems what determined the Bolshevik victory was, above all, its control of the Black Sea Fleet. They used this light blue flag with a yellow stripe in the middle, not being formed by Tatars but instead by Cossacks, the Kuban People's Republic. After the collapse of the Russian Empire, the Kuban Cossacks formed a military government and even managed to gain recognition from Germany and Turkey. Although anti-Bolshevik, the republic didn't align with white forces and was somewhat caught between the conflict. They didn't have to fight against the Imperial Army, but they also didn't have their support, and so they ended up being overrun by the Red Army in 1919. Close by and north of Crimea existed the Free Territory. This one is completely crazy as well and follows the trend of the pirate flag we saw in that Estonian state. This was an anarchist state, somewhat of an oxymoron, made up of several local governments and whose military force was a rogue Russian army, also known as Macnovia, after Nestor Makhno, the commander of this army. It existed from 1918 to 1921 with 7 million people. It was tolerated by the Bolsheviks, who didn't see it as a threat and likely had more important priorities to deal with. Eventually, they got upset at each other and the Red Army invaded and dissolved the state. Then the Kars Republic, lasting from December 1918 to April 1919. When Russia made an early and separate peace with the Central Powers in World War I, it was partly due to the upcoming revolution. Because of this perceived instability, after the armistice was signed, Ottoman troops did not withdraw from the area and had the goal of forming a puppet state. The flag they used even demonstrates that. The British didn't like this, and so they invaded it themselves, kicking out the Ottomans, which they were also at war with. Eventually, the local garrison was made up of Armenian troops, which contributed to the outbreak of another war between them and the Turks. Next, the Don Republic. The Kuban Republic was an example of Cossacks organizing in their own state, but the greatest biggest example we have of this is precisely the Don Republic. They proclaimed themselves as anti-Bolshevik and became an independent state formed by the armed forces of South Russia, essentially the Southern Imperial Army. In response to the Red Army's arrival to the region, these Don Cossacks raised an army of 50,000 men to fight. Eventually they were defeated and the Republic dissolved. After this, Cossack culture was highly repressed by the Red Army. Moving closer to the Caucasus region, the Mountain Republic, a united Circassian, Chechen, Ingush, Ossetian, and Dagestani state, led by a local oil baron, apparently, existing from November 1917 to May of 1919, long enough to form alliances with Germany and the Ottomans. Somewhat of a United States of the Caucasus, their flag even resembled the US one, with a population of around 11 million people. They were invaded and defeated by the Red Army in March 1918, but they recovered independence, only to be defeated again by the Imperial forces in May of the next year, then being absorbed into the Soviet Union after the end of the Russian internal conflict. Going back to the land around Armenia, the Aras Republic. With the chaos of Russia and the dissolution of the Ottoman Empire, the British proposed a border solution for this area, which gave the land to Armenia. Angry at this, a retired Azeri officer led a revolt and established an autonomous state with the aim of allying itself with the Turks. However, they failed and were occupied by Armenian forces in 1919. This area's temporary countries of this time really show us the border friction and constant conflict there was between the Russians and the Turks, as well as the cultural differences of the area. Another example is the North Caucasian Emirate, established as anti-Tsarist and being an Ottoman-aligned monarchy. They were initially allies of the Red Army since they had a common enemy, the Imperial forces. However, its own army was really small and its existence was completely dependent on Bolshevik support, which led to full Soviet annexation after the Emir died in 1920. Still in the region, and another attempt at uniting many local people, the Trans-Caucasian Federation. Literally only lasting a month in 1918, local people united and revolted against the fact that, according to the Brest-Litovsk armistice between Russia and the Central Powers, a lot of Georgia was given to the Ottoman Empire, so they created this independent state by declaring war against the Turks. But the union was fragile on its own too, and Armenia, Georgia, and Azerbaijan soon all left and dissolved it on their own. The North Caucasian Emirate sided with the Red Army against the Tsarist forces, but the opposite also happened, like we saw with the Don Cossacks, and also for instance with Mugan, a pro-Tsarist state organized by an imperial general with the support of British forces who didn't want the Bolsheviks to succeed. Eventually, the local people revolted against them and the British left, causing the state to be converted into a Soviet republic, which was itself dissolved soon after, only lasting 2 months. Another temporary Soviet republic was Gilan from May to September of 1921. This area is currently in northern Iran, at the time ruled by the Russians. There had been a growing anti-Russian feeling in the area, and especially an anti-Tsarist feeling, so with the 1917 revolution, the locals organized and followed the example, declaring their own Soviet republic in 1920. By 1921, Russia signed a treaty with Iran, handing over the territory, and Iranian forces occupied it, dissolving the republic and annexing the land. Further north and occupying a significantly larger territory, the Republic of Idel Ural, also seeking to unite a number of different people, the Tatars, the Bashkir, the Shuvash, and Volga German, who all inhabited the region and considered it their homeland. They claimed a big area between the Volga River and the Urals. However, these were just that, claims. In reality, they had a small army and only controlled parts of the city of Kazan, which were captured by the Red Army around 3 months after their proclamation of independence. Another large temporary country was the Alash Autonomy, which lasted some more time, from December of 1917 to August of 1920, a Kazakh government claiming a large portion of territory, which was in reality not under their control at all. It was essentially a battlefield between red and white forces. The local government changed sides with the tide of the war and finally split into 2 factions who supported each side. Eventually they gave up on their claim for autonomy and it simply merged with the Kazakh Soviet Republic within the Soviet Union, with the goal of restoring the Kokand Khanate, which had been conquered by the Russian Empire many years before. Kokand. They claimed the entire historical area of the Khanate, but only controlled the capital city. Apparently, the local elders of the area didn't agree with this new state idea due to some religious issues, and so they contributed to it not succeeding. But what determined its failure was the arrival of the Red Army, which apparently completely razed the city to the ground, not siding with the Soviets nor the Imperials, but as a cause of World War I Basmaki. It began as an anti-conscription movement, but eventually transformed itself into a revolt for Central Asian Muslims to seek independence from the Russians. It started very early if you consider the initial movement in 1916, but its transformation into a revolt was unorganized and very divided within many factions. They didn't have an organized army and so were easily defeated by the Bolsheviks in 1923. Now, if the Navy Fort one or the anarchic state one seemed crazy, get ready because this one was completely insane. The Confederated Republic of Altai in southern Siberia, which was, according to itself, the first step to rebuilding Genghis Khan's empire, but it just failed completely and was quickly reannexed by the Russians. And finally, all the way in the east, I couldn't even fit it on the thumbnail, the Far East Republic, which existed from 1920 to 1922. This one is really interesting because it wasn't trying to be independent or trying to side with one of the sides of the conflict. It was made up by the actual Soviet forces, attempting to establish a puppet state which would serve as a buffer between them and Japan, and most of all, stop Japanese expansionism into Siberia. And so, those were the temporary countries of 20th century Russia, a number of states or entities who, in the midst of the Russian Revolution, declared their independence or autonomy, some being ethnic minorities looking to establish their own nations, others local rulers attempting to seize their own power, exclaves of populations who wanted to join adjacent countries like the Finns or Ukrainians, or even simple military states that wanted to help one of the sides of the internal conflict between Bolsheviks and Imperials. All of them came to an end either during the times of the revolution, during the war, or with the establishment of the Soviet Union. But many of them represent what we still have today, with the autonomous republics or federated states of Russia, the many nationalities that exist inside Russia's gigantic territory, and the desire they had at the time to be independent. Thanks so much for watching this video. Leave a comment with your opinions or any other temporary states that you know about. Subscribe if you want, and I will see you next time for more general knowledge.